This week, we're joined by Jason Mccurdy of Philips. Jason is an expert in machine tools, and he has become an expert in robotics and automation over the last couple of years with a bunch of trials and tribulations. We have an amazing conversation today covering his first time using a robot, let alone any kind of automation, and going all the way through to figuring out where the real challenges are with customers, how he was able to ramp up a whole automation division, and really start to be able to sell robots for machine tools to that market.
Yeah. We also go into what the customers are missing, how the pandemic has impacted their business, as well as the customer's mindset around automation. We talk a little bit about advice that he would give to customers, as well as some new partnerships that Jason has worked with and Philips has just added to increase their automation capabilities and ultimately further their capabilities to their end customers. So
yeah, tune in. It's going to be a great episode.
It is. Yes, please. Thanks.
Welcome to the Robot Thought Leaders Podcast with Zach Tompkinson and Chris Savoya, bringing you in-depth interviews with industry experts driving change in the robot world.
What was your first time or your first interaction when you used a robot of any time, of any type, 6-axis robot? What was your first day ever using one?
Like probably the first day that I ever put my hands on one was whenever I got a demo from Zach and brought it on after I had been employed with Philips to build their automation division. So I actually am more heavy in the machine tool background, where I sold machine tools for a decade out in Arizona. Certainly Haas was one, and DMG Mori, another line that we represented there. But I can remember that first day and putting it in my hands and kind of working on my first palletizing routine. Zach was kind enough to let someone come down and support me. I think Chris came in and we shared some time together, and I was pretty impressed. I mean, really, at the end of the day, I just felt like it was going to be much more to it, kind of coming from the machine tool world, which is a little scary, walking up to a machine tool that, certainly can, cut weapons of mass destruction. And, this big animal, that we got is a little more intimidating than, putting a robot in your hand and kind of learning the palletizing routine in 45 minutes and you're off and running. So
was there a moment that day that you were like, clicked? Do you remember thinking at a certain point in time or with a certain action when you were like, I can see how my customers would want this?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it was actually that next morning. So he was going to come in around 7 o'clock, and I'm an early riser. So I got up and got in there early, and I was thinking, be interesting to see kind of how much retention I have, from one day of being on the ground and kind of picking that up and learning. And honestly, I was pleasantly surprised. I mean, I was going through things, picking up, moving things around, certainly getting into a palletizing routine, and kind of my first initial steps there, I thought went very well. So, yeah.
Awesome. Zach, do you remember that day?
Yeah, I do. I remember sending, I believe it was Andre down. And Andre was working up in the north, but had a lot of experience just putting his hands on robots in his history, because he worked at Rethink previously, where when Rethink was doing deployments, they were 100% out in the field, and they were so difficult that they had to really use their applications team to go on every install. So Andre was a part of that team doing a lot of hands-on with Rethink, which, if you're not familiar with that product, Jason, it's a very different collaborative robot. And so with that being said, I was like, this is a perfect fit. We'll send Andre down. He knows the robot really well. He gets the sales side. And so, yeah, Andre's actually now, he's joined our product management team to help kind of shape the future of what we need in the product. So he no longer is on our team, but which is great, because he really feeds the aspect or history of
Customer side.
what it takes to be with his history. Sorry. To bring that into our product, which is awesome. So yeah, I vividly remember it. And I remember being like, this is just an awesome opportunity because, you know, Jason, with his experience having 10 years in machine tool, is if he can pick this up, which he's done an amazing job picking up in the past couple of years, then this is going to be a match made in heaven.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome.
It was Andre, you're right. And so Andre was great. I mean, he handheld me. He took some time to sit with me and kind of go through things, but I was very surprised at the ease of use and how quickly we could pick that up and kind of really apply it, especially as it pertains to the machine tending aspect. You know, really at the end of the day, it's a pretty simple operation that obviously can get exponentially more complicated, you know, as we want to make it. As I always say, there's nothing time and money can't solve, right? I can build you any system that you'd like, but really where we've seen the benefit for the guys and certainly our client base is those easy, you know, repetitious type of operations that they can really see a good return on investment immediately in their organization.
What is that sweet spot, would you say? Where do you find your customers it's most sticky from a single robot, single machine solution? What is like the stickiest? And maybe that was a little assumption.
Yeah, it's a big question. I mean, you can look at it a million different ways.
Yeah.
Right?
So what is the stickiest solution and kind of price range?
So, you know, that is a broad question. Obviously, every one of these reads a little more like custom solutions than anything else. I mean, I have guys that are cutting, rods for Glocks, right? Push rods or whatever. And so we've got a little in feed that's built for that, and it's hand over hand passing, and they're picking it up and feeding two machine tools there, one on each side. We've got applications where we're utilizing and taking a forging coming in for an AR upper.
Yeah.
The AR upper gets landed. We actually use 2 robots, a transfer station. It's in 3 different machine tools. And by the time it passes it all the way to the end, the final step is actually the robot takes it out of op 30 in machine 3 or op 40 in machine 3 and then packs it. So from forging on the table all the way to packing out, literally all they got to do is stack the part and go pick it up on the other end. So
in that one right there, what's the hardest part? Is it the forgings when they're coming in and kind of getting them correct and lined up? Are they coming in? Are the forgings all coming in pretty uniform, or are they all different? Like, what's the hardest part there?
Really, as it pertains to machine tools, Chris, that's a good question. The truth is that it's not very difficult as it pertains to getting them seated in devices, because we do have probe systems. So we go down and verify that that's seated correctly before we start cutting. Probably the biggest challenge for them was the company wanted full recovery. So if you can imagine, you've got 2 robots. I'm picking up a forging, putting in op 10. I've got a forging in a flip station. I've got a forging in op 20. I've got a forging in a transfer station. I've got a forging in op 30, which is in machine 2. I've got a forging in op 40, which is machine 3. Well, if something were to happen in that cell with that many
permutations
going on,
yeah,
obviously you have to go and take out every one of those pieces and start that cell system over at the beginning.
You do.
And you have a real good recovery system there. So that's what we did. We went in for that company and we actually started in each operation, and we built in logic for them to go through and say, okay, it stopped here. Why? Where is your robot? Okay, if it's here, then you need to go here, hit recover. Now the cell starts working again and everything starts moving forward.
So they don't have to clear out each machine if that happens. They can just recover from the local error, and it doesn't affect the greater system.
That's right. So that we built that for them, and it took some time. Obviously, it was one of our first opportunities with Universal Robots.
Yeah. That's like starting simple.
Yeah, right. So, certainly a great learning experience for us, and quite frankly, a satisfied customer. So
That sounds like an entire area of expertise, just recovering from errors in a large scale system like that, so it's good you got the
There's a
experience.
lot of if-then statements.
it certainly is, and it was a lot more than we anticipated that we had kind of bit off there to make sure that happened right. So we spent several weeks on the ground just getting and working on recovery.
What did you learn for the next time?
That's right. We needed to know, so we know.
Yeah,
what did the engineering look like from your side when it came down to who was involved on your team to help put this together?
Really, I've got the best in the world as it comes to cutting metal and modeling and mock-up as it pertains to our applications engineers here with our Opto team at Philips. So I actually run that entire applications division now. We've merged applications and automation into one umbrella. So as it pertains to that, Zach, I'm really lucky. I mean, I've got the best guys that I can go to and say, here's a problem and here's what we need to resolve. And I've got 5, now 10 guys on the ground that can look at that and really make that come to life.
Is it a robot programmer, like a PLC control guy, maybe? Obviously, you have machine tool experts probably across the board. Mechanical design, electrical design. How's your team breakdown?
Yeah, really. So most of our guys can do most all of just what you said.
Awesome.
So we basically cross-trained our guys, at least 5 of our 10 that are heavy into robotics. Mm-hmm. So they robotics is really, in our world, it's kind of the easier piece, right? It's it's a very easy platform to go on and understand. Yeah. And if you understand logic and can think in that manner, then it's really easy to kind of pick that up and forge ahead. As in machine tools, it can get a little more cumbersome.
Sure.
And tricky, but our team breaks out into, we have a lot of artists, as I like to call them, and everyone has their own paintbrush. So yeah. I've got guys that are very heavy into training and school systems. I've got guys that are very heavy into macros and programming. I've got guys that are very heavy into custom solutions, and you can hand them just about anything in a print and they can, create it and build it and do it. And, you hit a button and it's over. So to answer your question, I have a lot of different artists that I kind of represent in terms of applications, and they all have their individual skill sets.
Very cool.
So the team breaks out. We're going to put 3 guys on the ground for sales. We're going to put 20 applications engineers on the ground. Right now we have 10. Wow. And so we've already doubled that team this year, and we're going to double it again before year end. And then we have an applications manager who will be running the applications division.
That's awesome. Quick question for you. I think you already alluded to it, but easier to program, a CNC machine or a robot? Or a universal robot?
By far, universal robot. I mean, there's no question about it. I mean, so
you can go to any CNC programmer and just be like, hey, if you can program this, then there is no question you got this.
100%. And we tell our guys all the time, I mean, really, the machine tools are where things need to happen. Yep. And once we get to that level, then really the robot is almost secondary at that point. Quite frankly, if I'm being honest, the robot is the easier part in the entire system. So really the UR is a great platform. And we typically spend more of our time in the building and the design and the making sure that it'll all work together, and in the effectors and the finger designs and those type of things. The robot is almost, it's a given. We know what we're going to get, and we know how to use it.
Yeah, so it's made that part of the process so simple, but that doesn't mean that the process itself is simple based on how you're going to solve this problem. When you look at fixturing or end effector or even communication,
Yeah, let's talk about that more. Definitely. I mean, the robot it's the robot and it moves around, but it's everything else is kind of where the magic happens. And I think, UR thinks about that a lot, and really the industry in general is moving towards focusing on the tools and peripherals that are going around that. So,
Mhm.
in your experience, what is like the hardest parts of that, like the little gotchas? And if you were to look 10 years down the road at what's going to be big to machine tools to help out the rest of this problem, not just the robot arm, where do you think it's going to end up?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good question. It's hard to address because it is a 50-piece puzzle, where robots one piece of that puzzle, and certainly the machine tool's another piece, and then you have 48 other pieces that have to kind of come together in harmony and make things happen, whether that's solenoids and pneumatics or hydraulics or end effectors or fingers or stands, in feed, out feed, vices, feedback from vices to make sure it's seated properly, also making sure the system is sound and safe with cell safe signals and communication where you can hit e-stop buttons and the machine tool and the robot stop at the same time. So it's hard to say what's more complicated than the next. The reality is when we came in, we just didn't know what we didn't know.
Yeah.
So what we did was we broke open the back of a Haas and said, okay, let's start with one. And so we just, understood that, hey, we've got two different controls. We've got a legacy and we've got a next generation control. So what do? We build a harness for the legacy and use discrete IO capability. And we still do with Ethernet. So our next gen controls, depending on the complexity of the cell, we may actually connect Ethernet and discrete IO using M codes and relays and terminals. So I guess it's all a little bit trial and error. What gets a little bit overwhelming is that it's 150, right? Plus, vendors available at your disposal for the UR platform.
Yeah.
If we're just looking at just their partners, that's not guys that haven't partnered with them at this point. They have things that'll work as well.
Yeah.
So navigating the sea of these different components and vendors and and trying to understand and take your time to go through and really kind of identify what's best for our market. I'll give you, for instance, early on, we found, that some coolant is more corrosive than other coolants, which we obviously knew, but as it pertains to the robotic world, you got to take that in consideration. So, it's something we hadn't considered in the past when you're just thinking about light sprays of coolant on a robot. But over time, that adds to a total.
And it started melting like the Witch of the West.
Right. You have to be cognizant of that. So you have to think about that.
And it's just different from where if you weren't going to use the robot or the robot peripherals in that situation, right? The automation aspect, it's just interesting. Now you're in a whole new ballgame and you don't know what you don't know, like you said. And all of a sudden now something that was never an issue pre-automation is now an issue, and it has nothing to do with the actual pieces of the automation. It's just combining the two together, and now all of a sudden you got like a coolant issue.
That's right. And so again, until you live through those, you can't see what you can't see. So a lot of it was trial and error on our part. We did keep the cost down as we don't have a bench testing facility, and certainly I can't put every machine tool that we have in existence, which is hundreds, that even fall under our flag, to make sure that I have a bench test facility for every robot application. And we build that, pre-build, manufactured. So a lot of ours was, we would build and design up front. And a lot of it was we put them together on the client's floor. So that came at a cost as well. Obviously full transparency in front of the client on a lot of times doing things that we haven't done before. But my guys are run at a high level. So, I mean, the truth is I have an elite task force, if you will, that can get that done. And we've been able to recognize some good growth numbers because we've been able to keep the costs down because we do it on the floor and kind of as an assembly, and we don't have that additional cost up front. So
nothing like being live on plant floor and doing it live to really see what level your guys can perform at. I've been in that position as well.
Yeah, nothing like being in the spotlight to make you step up your A game.
Yeah, you start sweating, that's for sure.
That's
So
right.
one thing I always think about for machine tools is the fingers, and what a difficult, and it just seems so trivial when you think about it. There's the entire subject of soft jaws on a CNC and how those are used. Some people don't need them, but a lot of people use them. And I feel like that concept hasn't really made its way over to robotics and the fingers and grippers that they have right now. So
Sure.
is there like a scoping process that you go through when you're looking at these parts and you're saying, damn, that's gonna be really hard? Or is there like a check mark list in your head that you're kind of looking at when you're considering how these fingers are going to work?
You know, again, that's a lot of trial and error, Chris. I mean, the reality is, we've just learned over time kind of what to look for and how to marry these up.
Hmm.
The beauty of Philips is that we are a technology hungry company. One of the things we've just done, in fact, is we've signed up with Mark Forge to be a distributor for them.
Oh, cool.
And so we're
Yeah.
working on finger design
Awesome.
and soft jaws and all kinds of things that
Yeah.
are going to marry these two technologies together,
Yeah.
which we think are a home run. In fact, I'm working on a demo that we're going to put together for a road show for some of our guys right now, where we're going to show off not only the Haas, but the UR and Mark Forge.
Oh yeah.
And that'll play very well for us. So we do see that division growing exponentially, especially as it pertains to the marriage of robotics, because you're right. Finger design, even cable management,
Yes.
soft jaws we can print on Mark Forge. I mean, there's a multitude of things that we can do on the fly that customers
Rapid
can do.
prototyping as well in there, just for I said rapid prototyping as well.
Yes.
Just, that's awesome.
Giving us more functionality, giving our clients more capability in their shops, adding that additional platform where they can generate revenue from it. But to your point, Zach, yeah, prototyping, one-offs, fit and finish, all those things can be done now in a matter of minutes or hours as opposed to days and weeks. So incredible.
So I have a question for you. When you came into this role and you had to build out this automation team for robotics, and is that correct? Or
I was the automation team.
You were the automation team. Yeah. So as a manager, how did you even go about thinking about how to solve this problem of scaling this organization from, very little to do with this and with little experience to growing out a team where you're saying you're going to be doubling it by next year, right? So how do you approach that strategically, kind of getting away from robots, I guess, just in general?
What I did was I forged an alliance with some of our internal partners. So several of our guys that are elite programmers, and really kind of latched hold of them to get a clear understanding of what we would need to grow and build and produce so we could have a clear go-to-market strategy. That was the first thing. So that was what we worked on originally, and Zach and his team were instrumental in giving me the resources that I need with Travis Langford and Justin Crump and Carl and several other guys that kind of helped and held me in the beginning to kind of get a comprehensive list of what a machine tending application would look like. And then we started, going through our diligence process with the vendors. So, I mean, all the vendors and all the UR and all the UR plus, if you can imagine, you've got like 100 guys ascending on you every week trying to get your business. And so we had to really define those channels and who our partners would be and kind of understand that and navigate that. So that was a part of that equation. Once we kind of had our head wrapped around that, it was as simple as going to our salesmen and getting them educated, helping them understand that we were ready for robotics, putting together some demos and some success stories, which we did as quickly as possible. Unfortunately, we went straight from 3 or 4 months of that straight into the pandemic. So I was only here like 4 or 5 months, and then immediately we took a turn. The benefit of that is for our organization, we put about 25 robots in play last year, integrating through the pandemic and with very little experience.
Did it
So-
accelerate in those 25 installs? Would you say that what percentage of them would you say were accelerated due to COVID conditions? Maybe labor, maybe just
That's a good
futuristic
question. I think that's a tough question to answer in our world, Zach, because our guys are retiring at a very quick level in terms of skill set, right? So our engineers, the guys that do programming, the guys that are manufacturing.
It's an old industry for sure.
The industry is evaporating, at a very high level. So the truth is I could have gone and sold machine tools again. But I got sick of listening to people for the past decade say, I would buy another machine from you if I just had an operator to come on board and work. And I can't find good people. So the reality is I just felt like I wanted to solve that problem. So, and I think that's what this is doing. So This will be a huge piece of our business going forward. To your point, I think that although the pandemic may have hurt us some in our initial selling of the robotic solutions during that tough time, I think ultimately will catapult this into a different direction as more of a need than a technology want.
So one thing
I'd like to buy an operator with your machine tool, I guess is kind of the pitch.
That's exactly what we're pitching. So meet your next machine tool operator, and he's a robot.
One thing that I've noticed, and we've talked about it a couple of times in the podcast, is that people that were maybe kind of resistant to robotics because of the cloud kind of around robotics, and they
Mystery, you mean?
Say it again.
Like the mystery or
mystery, negative connotations to it, stealing people's jobs, the sort of the negative piece of robotics. And there are a lot of sort of customers out there that do not want to necessarily be early adopters to any technology.
Sure.
But what I've seen is the curve of adoption has really changed from the customers I've spoken with this year that are buying their first robot, saying, this is something that we have to do. Yeah. The labor gap is only getting worse, especially in small and medium-sized customers. And sometimes they are like, it's absolutely because of COVID that they woke up one day and go, wow, look at what I've had for challenges over the last 5 years. The pandemic has just opened my eyes to it. It's not that the pandemic's going to be here forever, because it's not. Right. Things are going to go back to normal. It's not that they need to be socially distanced. Maybe that was a short-lived, let's socially distance people by putting a human in between with a robot in between. But now it's more, my eyes are open to, there are a lot of risks if I'm relying on more and more labor, if I'm going to scale and grow. If my company is going to be double what it was in 5 years, and I need double the workforce to get there, and I'm struggling to fill my labor now, the pandemic only allowed them to sit back and go, there's also all these other risks, that are in this labor gap. I'm just curious if you've seen similar change in mindset that maybe the pandemic didn't actually create, but it allowed people to sit back and go, wow, there's a lot of risks here.
Yeah. I do believe exactly that, Zach. I think that's well put. I think that really it opened everyone's eyes to the possibilities of what risks were actually involved, especially as it pertains to skilled labor. As I see these guys, these business owners, very smart guys cutting metal, most of them were, come up with some design, and then that scaled into some sort of business that spawned off in all these different directions. We've come into a very different environment now where technology is kind of catching up with us, and that we can actually utilize that technology to become more competitive, both domestically and internationally. So as we latch hold of this technology, the truth is we all have to wake up and hear that call, because if you're not moving forward in today's environment, you're falling behind. I can promise you that. We're in thousands of shops.
Other countries who, I don't care if it's China or Europe or wherever, but frankly, as an American and as someone that's heavily focused on manufacturing here, I want nothing more than everyone to reshore and there to be such a huge labor gap. but everyone wants to manufacture here, and that
Sure.
we really pursue automation, because that's ultimately what China's even doing now, right? I mean,
Sure.
they have a labor gap there, and their acceleration into robotics is like 3 times faster than ours is right now. And no one's worried about the mystery or the fear of someone it's stealing somebody's job, because there's so much manufacturing going on and so many jobs not being filled that they have to put robots in.
Yeah, and I think most people are coming to the realization now that as clients have gotten right sized, they're not carrying a lot of overhead. That's just additional overhead for their organizations. They really took the time during the pandemic to kind of scale themselves appropriately. And I think as we, again, forge ahead into this new technology segment that we're about to see, actually embracing this is the only clear path.
Yeah.
I mean, most of these guys are going to have to concede that to be competitive and to be as profitable as they need to be to grow their organization, they need to latch hold of whether that's robotics or possibly additive or maybe Mark Forge and printing, for one-offs and prototypes. I mean, again, I could go on and on and on about the technology that's available, but really, what automation is to me is kind of learning how to do more with less people and less time. So a lot of it is you don't have to think about it like I've got to go from ground zero and I've got to go buy a machine tool and get a robot today. It doesn't have to be that dramatic and a hard right, which we sell those guys all the time, and they jump off, and with us, and we partner together strongly with them. But I think it's what people need to embrace right now, especially as it pertains to manufacturing, is that it's just the little things. What if I could automate your vices, where you could have quick change or quick change tooling, or we could do pneumatics or hydraulics in your system so your guy didn't have to do so much changeover, and we can speed that up. We can have an in-feed system that's, exchangeable, so that machine never goes down, and now we're constantly feeding it and that green light's on, all the way to robotics, all the way to camera systems, all the way to conveyor systems and 6th and 7th axis and whatever. But I think it's the baby steps that we all have to understand. It's the direction that we need to head. It's going to make your business more profitable. It's going to put your people in a position of more skilled labor needs, and it's going to give your people the ability to grow in that organization and to move up as your company becomes more profitable. So I think people are really understanding that robots aren't here to take jobs at this point. I mean, I think most people have understood that now after the pandemic.
It's like sometime in the last 2 years that has changed dramatically.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, we just have to embrace what's coming, and we have to make the most of it. And I think most of our guys are trying to do just that.
It's really interesting. The piecewise automation. It's almost like people are using robots as the end goal, right? But there's like 20 steps between a fully manual, like slow changeover machine before you can put a robot on it. And people don't always see those steps in between. That's where your expertise comes in. And really the rubber meets the road, I guess, in terms of getting robots deployed with machine tools.
Well, and I think everyone at this point, if you're not looking at robotics today, okay, but you will be in the next year to 5 years, whether you want to or not. However, if you're not looking at your floor and trying to assess, how do I do more with less? How do I get more throughput on this machine tool? How do I make more profitability by making some slight adjustments? I think you're missing the mark. I think you're going to be, I think the technology is moving too fast right now.
Yeah.
Well, on a podcast we just shot, an interesting comment that came up was like, okay, fine. Like, you might not need a robot right this second for a certain task, or it might not fit the perfect ROI. It might not have that sub-year ROI that you were really looking for. but at the end of the day, you'll get this LOI or learning on investment because you're going to need robots in the next 5 years. So you better learn now rather than trying to learn it when you absolutely have to have it, or your company's going to go under, or you're going to have to move plants or sell your company because you just don't have the capability to take on the demand. You have to be able to do that. And so for a lot of companies, it's like, let's get this now so we can learn these skills because we don't have them now.
Yeah.
Right. No, I agree. I think most companies are trying to embrace that technology and learn it. I think now's the time, quite frankly. Yeah. I mean, we're, most of our clients, it's a longer sales cycle. Most of our eyes, it's like, I need a machine. I know the machine. I need it here yesterday. Right.
Yeah.
Because I got a contract and I need it. Most of our guys, it does take 2 or 3 months in a sales cycle to kind of get embraced and acclimated to robots and get a comfort level of, what we know and what we can do for them and how we can partner with them and be, and really support them. But the truth is, it's funny. Every time we do, a month or two later, we're talking to those same clients about, hey, I want to automate 80% of my shop.
Yeah, right.
Hey,
it's not one anymore. Now we've got one. Let's talk about the 20 others.
I'm sorry, Zach.
Oh, I was saying it's not one anymore. It's like, well, we did one, but there's 20 other identical machines. So can we talk about how to do that?
And I think that's something that we have struggled with educating our clients, and I think would be good, hopefully, for the people listening to this podcast to understand is that, certainly any robotics company, especially even in terms of us, we can solve any problem, whether it's conveyors or paint booths or camera systems or, again, nothing time and money can't solve, like Zach is over there, shelling it out. We can solve it. But I would always ask that client, there's a machine you got sitting in your shop right now that's probably cutting dovetails for fixtures that you just take parts and put them in there and then they can cut them. Just put a robot in front of it. That robot will sit there and do that all day, every day. All you got to do is keep it fed. It's simple. It's easy to do. It's a great return on investment. And then take that part that you're making all that margin in, that's got to go to a paint booth and got to go to a conveyor and got to be inspected 6 different ways to Sunday, and put your guy on that, because that's where your money is. And let him do that one, and then we'll do the easy ones, and now you're making more money.
Yeah, so don't target your biggest pain point necessarily. Your biggest pain point might be the hardest one, and it might overcomplicate the whole thing, but it's the one the customer wants to go to first. And I always say that the best sales guy can take a customer and move them from what is the biggest pain to what is the easiest application.
That is, I agree. A mark of a good sales.
And I think that's the toughest part for guys to understand. It's that, yes, we can solve that riddle for you, and yes, that would be great, but you also could take that same robot. We could deploy it in 3 days, and it could be cutting parts every day. And when you leave home at night, instead of it being so complicated, it's consistent, and you let that thing run for an extra, 20 hours while you're out of the shop, or extra, 16 hours in a day.
Yeah.
And now you're making money.
Yeah. With changeover, you talked about changeover, and one thing that it seems as if CNC machines, well, they certainly change over more than robots do. No doubt about it. But they've certainly made changeover. Well, from my perspective, it seems as if they've also made changeover easier. Mm-hmm. Is there something in the market that you feel as if robots need to be able to change over more as a whole? And I think UR has targeted that so far, but I think that there's maybe more room to go. Curious of your thoughts.
Yeah, I think we're, especially as it pertains to our market, I think there's more room to grow in the job shop level where changeover is critical, meaning they don't have huge lot runs of, 500 to 10,000. These guys are doing 20 and 30, there's a lot of companies out there that I've worked with and some even partnered with to help, create what they're creating today, to kind of get us better about that. And whether or not we can change from one machine tool to another machine tool very quickly and kind of get that deployed in the right way, which we're doing some of that now. So I definitely think there's room to grow on all fronts, Zach, in terms of robotics and what we can do. I think we're really just on the beginning phases of what we'll see here in the next 2 to 3 years, especially as it pertains to changeovers and end effectors and quick change solutions and more automation. But quite frankly, even as it pertains to AI and what we can really teach that robot to do and it can learn. So
yeah, because I mean, you're looking at, if you got to run a 500 to 10,000 parts, like a day setup, maybe a half a day setup, like makes sense, right? But if you're running only 20 parts, a half an hour setup is about as much time you could spend on that to make it make sense.
That's correct. And even if that would work, right, but it'd just be based on the cycle time. And if that would be feasible, otherwise you make it run all 20 of them in 30 minutes. So we do feel that, Chris. And, most of our machine tending solutions at this point have been longer lot runs, or maybe a family of parts that are pretty consistent with one another that they can change through, with minimum, we really, train the robot approach, on one side to approach on the other. And then it's a few waypoints difference, and then makes it pretty easy on their side. But, I do see a lot of opportunity to grow there. There's some things we're working on even today to make those things easier. So
yeah, that's great feedback too. You got some people in Universal Robots that would want to talk to you, I'm
Definitely.
sure. Yeah.
Sure.
Also part of the reason why I wanted him on. Game,
Right.
he's a thought leader for sure in when it comes to the machine tool world and taking on collaborative robots and universal and robots in general, because I think that the market is extremely untapped so far and has a lot of interest. So I've got a fun question for you. More valuable investment long term. You have to pick one. A lathe, automating a lathe, or automating a mill?
Oh man, it'd be next to impossible to say.
He immediately goes, "Oh man."
Just what are you cutting, Zach? I mean, are we cutting wheels? Are we cutting?
It's from your perspective, though. So from Jason Mccurdy, Phillips' perspective, not the customer's perspective on this one. I'll ask that next.
Yeah. So I mean, I would say long-term investment if you're going to buy a robot. I mean, obviously, your quickest path to ROI is through a lathe.
Yep.
Because we don't have to use vices and so on and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
So if I'm looking at it just from a sheer, and I went to school to be an accountant, if I'm just looking at it from a sheer numbers perspective, I'm putting it on a lathe because one, it cost me $15,000 less probably, and two, if those parts are pretty consistent and I only have to find center line and it never changes of that
Exactly.
shot.
Yeah.
So I just keep feeding it.
Go.
Yes, sir.
But everybody wants to automate a mill.
That's right. Yes. Yeah, everybody wants to automate a mill and then set it on a conveyor and run it down, and another robot pick it up and put it in a paint booth, and another one to take it out and then run it down another conveyor and deburr it or what. I mean, we can do it all, but I would stick to the simple. The truth is though, is I think the reason, to your point, that a lot of people do mills and want to do mills is because of work migrates, especially in terms of the Haas market and what we've been able to accomplish toward our mills. Those machine tools that, kind of represent and ride in that 90-95% range of, best in class. So
sure. Well, there's a lot of automation solutions out there, I feel like, for lathes, and not that there aren't some for mills, but just percentage wise, obviously with like a bar feeder, there are areas that you can automate that have already been state of the art or, industry standard up until this point.
Yeah, that's a great point. So between bar feeders and parts catchers on doors of lathes and, Y-axis and subspindle and live tooling, I mean, they're to some degree, they already were automated, and now we're really just kind of taking that up another level and allowing it to kind of go in. And even if it's bar fed, a lot of times we're doing those solutions now, bar fed,
Yep.
subspindle, we take it out, we move it on in its process. So, yeah.
Zach, were you going to ask another question? From
Oh,
a customer perspective,
I was
or-
just, I think he
Whatever
really
number?
did answer it with the customer's mindset. I was trying to get him to be greedy here, which I don't think we got, but I don't expect him to do that either. I was trying to set him up for failure.
Jason, just learning a little bit more about you. When was your first time using any kind of machine tool? Did you start out on Bridgeports like in high school?
Oh
Like-
no! So I'm not an applications engineer. So I've sold anywhere from $20,000 machine tools to $1.6 million machine tools. So, and I'm not the guy that would be working on them or fixing them or programming them. So my skill set is building businesses. So that's what I've done
He's
all
doing.
my life.
That's what he's doing right now.
Yeah. So I've been in sales most of my life, in one capacity or another. I've opened a couple of businesses myself, and run even a restaurant and sold that. So I'm more on that level, building infrastructure, sales.
How
Business.
nice is that though? You sold your restaurant in what, 2019?
Yes,
Pretty good timing.
pretty good timing. Yeah, we got lucky. So
How is that restaurant doing now?
Another restaurant or coming home to the south. So we decided to come home, and all that led to Phillips and this great organization that I'm with now. Otherwise, we would have opened another restaurant, and the pandemic would have happened. So we got very blessed.
How is that restaurant doing now? Do you know?
I honestly haven't talked to the guy. I don't even know.
Well, that's good.
I
He hasn't
hope
sent you
doing good.
any angry messages.
Yeah, I haven't gotten any.
You didn't leave him with the bag. Hold
So
the
I think it's
bag.
safe. Right. Yeah.
So I want to just go down into one last thing here from a customer perspective. What is the biggest maybe misconception or area of advice that you can give to a customer that's looking to automate?
I think just take it in terms as you would if you were from our industry standard, if you were changing platforms and a control platform. So it's easy. I don't want to get away from that. I mean, it is very easy. It's much easier than any traditional robot could be. Certainly we've all been down those paths as well in our previous lives. But it does take time. It takes an investment. It takes an investment both from a financial standpoint, but also from a mind share standpoint. You need someone to take ownership of that solution and that robot, really get entrenched in it, learn it, help you grow with it, and take ownership. So that would be my primary advice. I can't tell you how often, we're over there and integrating a robotic solution. We do it in 3 or 4 days. We have two or 3 days left, and we're training. It's all going great. It's running fine. We may not be out of there a day, and we get a call, the robot's down.
Yep.
So, but if you're not putting your mind around that and getting embedded in the waypoints and the moves and the logic, you got to take ownership of it.
Yeah.
So, one of the things that we run into all the time is just simple. I accidentally touched the control, and put a additional waypoint in here. So my thoughts will be several things: is have someone that has accountability and ownership for the robot. It'll take much less time than you think, but it does take time. Someone has to be there to be a part of it. Pick the simpler solutions to begin with, get that quick return on investment, feel good about your investment, and then you'll want to deploy that in more areas as well, as opposed to being some super complicated, custom solution. Like, really, to your point, just embrace it early. Don't wait until it's a need. if you can afford to, and you know that this is going to be an investment and you want to invest into technology this year, do it in the downtime, or do it, instead of waiting until fourth quarter of this year, do it now, and then take that year to learn and get somebody on it to get them up and acclimated, because when it becomes mission critical, it becomes mission critical.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's why automotive companies have always been run really well. And so I think that's why in a lot of cases, automotive companies have been first adopters in robotics. And even we see that within collaborative robots too. And I think we're seeing it penetrate into a lot of different industries now. But it's interesting that we've seen automotive say, okay, well, where do we need to be in years to come? How can we do best practices for improving what we do? So that's the Six Sigma and lean manufacturing.
Well, automotive is a tight industry with thin margins and a lot of competition.
Yep.
So it would make sense that you're squeezing everything there.
Yeah, Chris, that's a perfect point. The guys in the automotive industry, and especially as it pertains to the aftermarket, those are razor thin margins. So if you're not looking at how you can do more with less, you won't keep up in that industry very long.
Yeah, absolutely.
Open book and everything.
Switching over from machine tool to a different type of machine tool. What's that like? I've never had to deal with that. That's probably one of the biggest things that a manufacturer might ever take on, is switching a machine tool like that, or how's it go?
Yeah, it's interesting. We talk about it a lot, but it hasn't happened very often. We actually have several projects going on right now where we're doing that, but it's an upfront cost. The reality is it's not just to prep the machine tool. You have to think about AutoDoor, you have to think about M codes, you have to think about macros. So if you just put those things on, whether or not your machine was retrofitted and how you want to do that, that could cost you as little as $3,000 or as much as $15,000.
Yeah.
So again, that's an investment that you have to put there, knowing that that's just sitting there if you need it, and then you can take that robot and move it. And there's other things to take into consideration. We have to put on, like a toggle switch to make sure when we pull that robot off, we can flip it up, and then that machine tool can run. That was something that we worked with several vendors in the beginning that we just didn't like, is that a lot of these Raspberry Pis and the things the guys were putting in terms of connectivity, when the robot went down, the machine tool was down.
Yeah.
Our world,
dependency.
Work. That guy's not going to be holding to that robot. When that machine is there, he wants that machine reading green and those chips flying and that money being printed.
Yeah.
So, we got to identify that very early on, and we've made some modifications on that, Chris, to kind of handle that. But
to switch almost between automatic and manual, really.
That's right.
Yeah.
So, and we do it even with pneumatics. So if you pull that robot off, we'll build a box for the guys on the outside where they can open and close their vices, so they can still utilize that machine tool with a human if they want to take it and move it on.
Yeah.
All things we've had to develop and kind of grow into and build in the last year and a half. So
cool. A lot of proprietary knowledge here.
Yeah.
Figuring out there. Those are the tricks, though. Those are always the tricks.
Yeah.
That's what you got to build, to be the best, and certainly Phillips stands for that. And our team, I just couldn't be more proud of them. We've got a long way to go. We've come 1 million miles, and we have 1 million miles to go. But we feel good about this direction. We know robotics is going to be a huge part of our growth and our growth strategy, and so we're positioning ourselves accordingly.
Very good. Do you have any questions for us while we're here? It's okay if you don't.
Chris, tell me a little bit about yourself. Where'd you come from?
So I started in lasers, actually. Lasers and optics. I graduated working with like high power lasers, cutting, welding, marking. Worked my way up there, did a lot of field installs, flying around the country, flying to other countries, installing those. After some time, we became an industrial robot integrator. We started doing industrial robot integrations with these high-powered lasers. Kept showing up to Chicago at IMTS and FabTech and stuff like that, and I would see Zach in the Universal Robots booth. And, he was like, yeah, we got a spot here at Universal Robots. Why don't you come over and work here? So I started working at UR in the field, worked my way into sales eventually, which was quite an interesting change of career and a great background for me. I think if I could recommend to anybody, spending some time in sales will change the way that you view the world and your industry. So that was a great experience. Now I run the UR Plus side of things here in the Americas. So all those products you were talking about, basically, I'm in charge of managing them and getting them onboarded and
Perfect.
yeah. So
No,
Yeah,
it's
so if
great.
there's ever any challenges, you
It's a
just
lot
reach
of
right
them.
out to him.
What's
exactly.
that?
We're always looking for ideas for new products. So it sounds like Philips has a ton of expertise there that they might be able to productize. So talk to me sometime about it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. If I can get some bandwidth, we got some great ideas, that's for sure. I just need a little bit more time to allocate those resources correctly, get some of that stuff built. So I'm happy to talk to you, Chris, for sure.
Absolutely.
I think there's some things that we've already built that you guys would probably be interested in talking to us about.
It sounds like it. Totally. And
Yeah,
where you're down
from
North
an
Carolina?
Ethernet connectivity standpoint, we can show you some software we've written that'll make things very easy.
Yes, that sounds very interesting.
Tennessee.
Sure.
That's
Tennessee.
right.
You're in Tennessee?
Come see me in Nashville, Chris.
I will. I'm vaccinated now. I'm ready to travel again. So
Me too, man. I'm ready to get out. I know everybody is. Zach, how's everything going in your world, buddy?
It's good. I get vaccinated tomorrow,
Nice.
which is nice. Although, to be fair, I will plug that this has got to be the world's largest experiment ever done. Because there's no way that they did all the proper testing that they needed to in the 1 year that they had to build this and deploy
they
it.
started with the SARS vaccine. So it wasn't like new. Well, for the most part. I can't talk about AstraZeneca.
I'm right, wrong, or indifferent. You can have your opinion on whether you want to take it or not. I just want to get back out to my regular life, but there is a lot. I still feel like a guinea pig. So we'll see what happens.
Yep.
But it's good, man. Excited to come down and see you in Nashville soon. Get together, have some beers. It's been a long, long time. Excited to get back in front of more customers again. It's not really been a prevalent need for the sales manager to be visiting customers for the past year. And so that's real exciting to be able to not just virtually see customers anymore and actually get out there. But I would say the one nice thing about COVID is you don't have to travel everywhere to do every meeting like we were doing previously. Mm-hmm. So I think that we'll become much more efficient, and I'd say have a much healthier split of traveling for the important ones and doing a lot more and probably more often meetings virtually. So
yeah, and we feel the same. In fact, I know you were coming in mid-April, so definitely hit me up on that, because we've got an opportunity to actually be out and do a demo finally, and our company's kind of getting back in, revved up, and getting excited about going out and seeing some of our customers face to face and kind of putting some of those things together. So let me know for sure.
I will.
I want to make sure I'm here when you come in town so we
Definitely.
can share some time. But
you should take Zach on the demo and put the teach pen in his hand.
Yeah,
that's right.
Believe it or not.
Oh, I'm sure of that. Yeah, I'll definitely do that. Let him run with it.
I took over the demo on my little brother the other day. He was trying to do a demo, and I just took it out of his hand and started doing it for the customer. Yeah.
Can't help it.
I can't help it.
Yeah, no, I get it. I feel the same. But yeah, I've enjoyed this time together. I think this is awesome, Zach, that you put this together, you and Chris, and I think this is a great opportunity for all of us. I mean, the reality is we're concentrating more. I'm growing both divisions. So I've got an applications division, obviously.
Yeah.
But we see the largest share of our growth really being in the robotics. Mm-hmm. That's what's going to catapult us from kind of where we've been to where we need to go.
Well, and hopefully it also drives, like you said, a lot of those customers that say, I would buy more machine tools if I had another operator, right? And now it's like, well, hopefully the growth from the robotics allows you to sell more machine tools as well. So it kind of acts as a stimulant to create more growth within your machine tool.
We do see that synergy, and that's really, Michael Gardner, our president, he had the vision to kind of see that. And now I see that with Mark Forge as well.
Yeah.
All of these kind of work hand in hand in partnership with one another, even additive, and additive machining.
Absolutely.
And then the hybrid between that and subtractive. it's just a really exciting time in terms of technology. I think we've got a long way to go, and I think we're kind of on the precipice of that. So
I agree. Well, hey man, really appreciate you taking the time. I know it's late, and
Dinner time.
it was I'm definitely getting hungry here, but we really appreciate it. It was an awesome interview. Your knowledge is going to hit the airwaves, and I think it's going to make some waves. So I'm excited to see the response that we get. It's going to be fun.
awesome, guys. I'm glad to be a part of it. Y'all let me know if I did anything crazy, and we can redo something.
Sounds good.
No,
Thank
you're
you
good.
very much, Jason.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, guys. Appreciate it. Have a great day.